Since the birth of the medium, video games have been challenging. Really challenging, in fact. I mean, they kind of had to be. There's no challenge, there's no way to lose, and ultimately, loss was the motivator to pop in another quarter. As home consoles became more ubiquitous, loss was the motivator that forced you to pick the controller back up and try again after stewing in your frustration.
Avoid the ground.
So too does challenge facilitate the win, the victory over hardship. You may have died 100 times on that level, but when you finally overcame, every death felt worth it. As the medium has grown, many games have become easier and more accessible, while others have doubled down on difficulty in an effort to push players to their absolute limits. What's the right balance? When is a game too hard? I wanted to examine this question through the lens of Demon's Souls, as I just recently completed it for the first time. By now, pretty much everyone and their mother has heard of Demon's Souls developer From Software, the studio best known for Elden Ring, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, Bloodborne, and the Dark Souls trilogy. The original Demon's Souls was released in 2009. On playing the 2020 remake developed by Bluepoint, it immediately became a critical darling. It laid the groundwork for what would be known as the Souls-like genre, which has become one of the most ubiquitous game types of the last decade. The genre possesses numerous defining characteristics, with perhaps none being more infamous than difficulty, a fact that I've been extensively reminded of over the last few weeks. First things first, the Demon's Souls elevator pitch. It's an action RPG that finds you exploring various levels ranging from a castle plagued with angry dragons to rain-drenched fortresses plagued with angry flying manta rays. Okay. Each of these areas houses multiple bosses that each gatekeep the next portion of the level. If you want to move on, you've got to eliminate each boss one by one. The bosses, along with rank and file enemies, each drop a predetermined number of souls when killed, which you can use to level up your stats. The higher your level, the stronger you get and the more formidable foes you can face. The catch is that dying drops these souls in the spot where you fell. If you perish again before reclaiming the souls, they're lost for good. That's Demon's Souls in a nutshell, but why exactly is this game so hard? Well, from my perspective, difficulty in video games can be broken down into two main categories: figuring out what it is you need to do and actually doing it. With regard to the latter, Souls is no slouch. If you've never played one of these games before, I'm not sure how hard they really look, but trust me, if you're not careful, you'll quickly encounter a kick of the rear. The game's combat is real-time, of course, but is a far cry from the frenetic, combo-based combat of games like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry. It's slower-paced, feeling much more contemplative in nature. You'll need to employ both offensive and evasive measures in equal part if you hope to push onward. Combat can feel a bit like a chess match, with both opponents eyeing each other down to see who will blink first. Often, multiple combatants will swarm you at once, which essentially guarantees death if you're not able to think swiftly on your feet. Some enemies are pretty straightforward, but many feature attack patterns with strange timing, or attacks with a wide area of effect, making them difficult to manage. These challenges are further intensified during boss fights, which might be what this series is most known for. Some of them can actually be pushovers, but generally, bosses in Souls games are the most common points where players are inclined to throw in the towel. At their most difficult, the bosses are absolutely brutal, offering no reprieve as they pulverize. They're inclined to unleash attacks that can cover a huge distance or a flurry of multiple attacks in a row. All of these moves are difficult to avoid, which is exacerbated by the fact that the game often places you into arenas that are either cramped or easy to fall off of. Whether you're facing bosses or underlings, perhaps the most unforgiving aspect of combat is just how much damage enemies can deal. It often takes no more than 2 or 3 hits to kill you. You can upgrade your maximum health, but that's a very gradual process. You can also heal mid-fight, but that opens you up to taking more damage. There's simply no way around the fact that, at least initially, you're gonna get your ass kicked. Something else notable about Demon's Souls is that beyond its inhabitants, the world itself behaves antagonistically. There are no quest markers or save zones in Demon's Souls. Outside of a small hub where you level up and select which area you want to explore next, you're pretty much always in some kind of danger. The levels in Demon's Souls are eclectic, ranging from mines to prisons to poisonous caverns. Each of them contain their own various environmental hazards. The world of Demon's Souls feels alive in a sense. It feels like an autonomous creature that wants you to die every bit as much as the enemies do. At every corner you may stumble upon a sharp cliff with no warning, a false floor that drops into a group of enemies, or even a trap triggered by a panel on the ground. Demon's Souls is the kind of game that springs a flaming boulder on you while climbing a narrow set of stairs and then puts an enemy in the only space you can use to avoid the boulder. Prepare to become intimately familiar with the words, "You died." Okay, so yes, accomplishing your goals in Demon's Souls is very hard, but what about that other category of difficulty that I mentioned earlier? That is actually deciphering the goal you're supposed to accomplish. Flashy bosses and brutal level design get all the attention, but I think an obtuse game can be just as punishing, something Demon's Souls tests extensively. This is not a game that holds your hand. From the get-go, you're thrust into the world to fend for yourself. Compared to subsequent games developed by From Software, Demon's Souls is surprisingly linear, but that's all relative. The game is still labyrinthine in nature, with some levels opening up into huge explorable spaces. Walls of fog generally indicate that you're headed in the right direction, but it's often easy to get turned around and disoriented. Many levels also feature extensive verticality, making them all the denser and more complex. Beyond the level design though, Demon's Souls has no interest in guiding you. You can level up in the game as I mentioned, but it's not a binary action. There are 8 different categories into which you can allocate your points. The game briefly explains what each trait improves, but it's still going to take some experimentation to determine which stats you actually want to focus on leveling. Demon's Souls seems to prefer telling the player as little as it can. For example, you're not able to begin leveling up until you defeat the game's first main boss. However, I didn't know that. So after killing the boss, I proceeded to play through the entire next area and defeat its respective boss as well. It probably took me about 2 hours to accomplish, but could have been made significantly easier and expedient had I known that I could already level. Another instance of the game's silence is a bizarre mechanic that lowers your maximum health when you die. You can restore your full health bar by either defeating a boss or using a particular item found in limited quantities. This is already a bizarre gameplay element, but apparently if you die in a level while you have your maximum health bar, not only does your max health reduce again, but the game itself actually becomes more difficult. Not once did the game ever explain such a strange, mean-spirited mechanic to me. Now, I'm not claiming the game definitively refrains from explaining these elements. It's entirely possible that I just missed them, but such important mechanics seem like they deserve pretty clear instruction. So, okay, we get it, Demon's Souls is hard, but Demon's Souls is also very critically acclaimed. It's also a commercial success. It also laid much of the groundwork for From Software's most popular titles. Despite it eliciting more frustration from me than any other game I've played this year, Demon's Souls kept me coming back again and again until the credits rolled. How can all of this be true at the same time? Well, it goes back to what I stated at the beginning of the video. Challenge is a vital ingredient in a video game's recipe. The rush of defeating a boss in Demon's Souls is uniquely euphoric. It's an accomplishment that can potentially take dozens of tries to achieve, but when you get it, when you finally nail it, you're on top of the world. Demon's Souls, simply put, demands excellence from the player. Yes, it's going to roll a flaming boulder towards you on a narrow set of stairs, and there's a good chance that'll kill you, but you'll adapt. The phrase, "get good," has become widely associated with Souls-likes and is a common response when new players seek advice. The sentiment may come across as callous, and I think it often is, but it also encapsulates the secret to success in Demon's Souls. You have to die, and fail, and fall until you take a step forward. You just have to practice and push up against the edge of hysteria until you come out the other side. For my money, that's a journey worth taking, as the worlds of Demon's Souls are so compelling to be a part of, and the thrill of victory is so intoxicating. Despite what could be perceived as a mean-spirited nature, the game seems to respect players that are willing to master its complexities. And ultimately, if all else fails, you can always just grind and overlevel yourself. That's actually something I genuinely enjoy doing in games, and is a big part of how I push through a Souls-like. Of course, Demon's Souls isn't for everyone. For some, a game like this sounds like a slog, devoid of even an ounce of fun. That feeling of reward that I get when defeating a boss may just be relief for someone else. Completing something hard always carries some kind of satisfaction, but I imagine everyone watching this video has overcome a challenge in a game that immediately made you say something along the lines of, "Thank God I never have to do that again." Instead of relishing the victory, you're just glad to put it behind you and immediately hope that the game won't feature anything else as frustrating as that was. What's interesting is that such a feeling is brought upon by different games for different people. There's really no way to answer the question, when is a game too hard, in a one-size-fits-all way. It just sort of depends on how your brain works. The Evil Within is a game I've talked about numerous times on this channel, but I haven't talked about its hardest difficulty setting, Akamu. In this mode, anything that hits you kills you in one hit. That's right, even a single hit from the weakest of enemies immediately sends you back to the last checkpoint. If it sounds insane, that's because it is, and yet, I did it. I beat my head against the wall and died a few hundred times, but I made it all the way through. Why? Well, The Evil Within is one of my favorite games, and survival horror is my favorite genre. It's a genre in which I want to be pushed, in which I'm willing to slowly, arduously claw my way towards the finish line. For others, including I'd imagine most of you, Akamu mode wouldn't be touched with a 9.5-foot pole. And that's okay. There are games and difficulty settings I feel the same way about. I've spent an entire video singing the praises of the Yakuza series, and yet I set every single one of those games to the easiest difficulty setting as soon as I start. Yes, I love those games, but above all else, I play them for the narrative. I'm here to see what crazy plot twist will unfold next, not to pull my hair out while getting destroyed by some sketchy dude from the Omi Alliance. I play different games for different reasons, and that's okay. For all the reasons that we play video games, challenge may harken back to the infancy of the medium more than any other. But as video games grow in complexity, so too does challenge. It can manifest in innumerable ways in every genre under the sun. Sometimes it's implemented poorly, seemingly unfairly, but even then, such masochism will appeal to someone out there. When is a game too hard? Maybe it's when you throw your controller to the side, potently frustrated and ready to be done with the game forever. But hey, we're gamers after all, destined to pick that controller back up after some time away. With enough patience, enough tries, enough quarters, we can always overcome. Maybe it wasn't too hard after all.